Call this meeting in order at 12 minutes after 6. Will you please call the roll?
Sure. Councilmember Eaton.
Here.
Commissioner Mirsky.
Here.
Commissioner Queasy.
Here.
Chair Appleyard.
Here?
And Commissioner Lippin.
Here. And?
Right.
And?
And
Oh. And Commissioner McComber.
quorum producer.
Perfect.
Great, welcome. I'll call for an approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to add anything to the agenda?
No. I wanted to add just an announcement about Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association's 2018 Business Leadership
I think you can do
Awards.
that under energy report.
I'll do that under energy reports, yeah.
So I'll call for a motion to approve the minutes, or the agenda.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Approval of the minutes. Everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from last meeting, from the October meeting?
They're not in front of us, right? I think we all saw them
Yeah.
Yeah.
via email. Yep.
Yeah,
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we come to the portion of our meeting where we have room for public input. If there's anyone in the audience who'd like to talk to us for up to 3 minutes about something related to energy, they can approach the podium and give us their name. Seeing no one moving, we'll close the public input and move on to energy report.
All right, so starting off with internal news, I have an update as far as the greenhouse gas inventory goes. We've been waiting some time for DT to give us some of that data. Bad news, we might have to wait a little bit longer until January. They said they'd have it ready for us. The good news is that we'll be getting 2016, 17, and 18. So I went ahead and talked to them about wrapping them all together. I figured if it was a tedious process, if they can get us all the information for the last couple of years, that would help.
That'd be great.
We also have a new staff person, a temp, who's helping me out, Faye Agerliner. So she might be coming actually to one of the future commission meetings as well.
So that means we would be able to update the inventory and update the dashboard
Yes.
sometime early in 2019? Is that
That would be the
timeline?
idea. Yep.
Okay.
Another thing as far as the dashboard, and I know there was a question, John, that you had about the dashboard, and so Missy Stultz is currently looking at redoing basically our web presence. So trying to figure out how best to get our message across and updating it on a number of different fronts.
Good.
As far as external news.
Josh, I have one more
yes.
question, if I may, on,
Yeah, please.
have we yet, or will we, with the updates, take into account the U of M, Ann Arbor, whatever it was, there was
Yeah.
an adjustment that we need to make based on the splitting out of those two entities and the transfer of the Pfizer property?
Yeah, so we'll probably be doing a presentation of the Energy Commission similar to what we did with the 2015 numbers. And with that, we'll be taking into account some of the, I guess, the information that we've gained since doing the original
Right.
inventory.
So that
So
update then in early 2019 will encompass all of that?
It'll encompass all of it, including, so 16, 17, and 18 numbers for the community.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
Good.
looking forward to it, yep. Okay, as far as external news, GLREA's annual meeting is December 8th, 2018, at the Freight House in Ypsilanti, Michigan. It occurs from 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And it looks like a pretty packed schedule with some good keynote speakers, so if anyone can make that, I think it's about $20, is that correct, to register? Yep. With that being said, I know.
So
Mark,
highlight of that is
yep.
one of our speakers tonight, Dave Stransky, is going to be doing a workshop at that meeting about how to organize volunteer solar projects in communities, and that's part of the morning session. So, great.
And Mark, I know you also had other news as far as the GLREA
You
award.
want me to do that here?
Yeah.
So GLREA gives out a series of awards, and they're giving out a number of awards this year, but I wanted to highlight one here because the Energy Commission endorsed this one. So I'll just read this. This is the write-up for the award. 2018 Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association Business Leadership Award. GLREA Business Leadership Award is awarded to businesses that have significantly furthered market transformation for renewable energy in Michigan. At their annual meeting in December, GLREA will make 2 such awards. First is to Mark Haggerty, President, Michigan Solar Solutions. Second is to Jeremy Zen, Project Manager, Oak Electric Incorporated. Starting in December 2017, both Oak Electric and Michigan Solar Solutions, at their own expense, assumed the responsibility for making sure Ann Arbor's homeowners who had paid for solar panels through GeoStellar's Solar Club program received their promise of raise or were otherwise made whole after GeoStellar's untimely and costly demise. Oak Electric and Michigan Solar Solutions' outstanding leadership efforts restored trust and faith in Ann Arbor's local solar small businesses, the solar industry, the Energy Office, and Ann Arbor's Climate Action Plan-related solar initiatives, all of which are paramount to the success of the city to honor and uphold Paris Climate Agreement goals. Michigan Solar Solutions and Oak Electric demonstrated outstanding entrepreneurialism, outstanding business leadership, and most importantly, honor and integrity in this effort. They are a credit to the solar energy industry in Michigan and to the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association in particular.
Well said.
Great.
Outside of that, the only other thing I had, John, I know that there was an article from the New York Times that you wanted me to, did you?
I have it too. You can read it as well, or I can, either way.
Go ahead, John, yeah, please.
Okay, I'm taking Chairman Appleyard's place of usually announcing reports and things like that.
That's fine.
I think this is of general interest to commissioners as well as everybody in the audience. So this is an article in the New York Times today, and it's reporting on a report that the International Energy Agency issued on Monday. It issues a World Energy Outlook, 661 pages long. I won't read 661 pages. But I will read the end of the article. It says, climate goals out of reach. Even with the impressive recent gains for renewable energy, the world is far from solving global warming. Global carbon dioxide emissions rose 1.6% last year and are on track to climb again this year. The report projects that emissions will keep rising slowly until 2040. One reason, carbon-free sources like wind, solar, and nuclear power aren't yet growing fast enough to keep up with rising global energy demand, particularly in places like India and Southeast Asia. That means fossil fuel use keeps growing to fill the gap. For this to change, nations will have to enact sweeping new policies like investing in energy efficiency to slow demand growth, curbing methane leaks from oil and gas operations, and developing carbon capture technology for existing fossil fuel power plants and cement factories. Governments will play a key role. The report notes that the world invests $2 trillion annually to its energy infrastructure, and 70% of that is directed by state-owned companies or regulators. That tells me our energy destiny will rely heavily on government decisions in the next 2 decades. And I think that applies certainly here in the United States at the federal, state, and even at the local level. So,
Thank you for that.
something for us to keep in mind as we go forward.
We have our work cut out for us. Any other energy news?
I think that does it for me.
Okay, moving right along. Next on the agenda, we are honored to have a presentation on the Ypsilanti Fire Station solar system. Take it away, Dave.
I didn't formulate a presentation. I was just going to explain what we did.
Dave, maybe you should introduce yourself because you're also on closed circuit TV and there's other people in the room that probably
Okay,
don't know you.
so I'm Dave Strensky, the solar guy from IPSI. I started Solar IPSI back in 2005, and we basically went from 0 to about a megawatt. Actually, I just did the math. 1.15 megawatts of power in the last 13 years. And so one of the, and kind of my philosophy has been, and you guys know who's been up on the roof with me, is no meetings, just do it. And so, my philosophy is the barrier to entry is the cost. And so how can I get the cost down? And there's several different ways. One way is to use volunteer labor, and that's kind of been my model. I'm a engineer by trade. I play with computers. I work for a company called Cray Inc. And so on my hobby, I've been designing systems, finding friends, and just kind of making it happen for people in my neighborhood. And right at the beginning, we were able to put 2.5 kilowatts on our city hall using volunteer labor, and getting it, that was with a grant. So I'm going to assume everybody here knows solar power. Do I need to do a quick refresher on solar power? Everybody knows how it works? All righty. So I forget, what year did we do this? 2016? 2016.
First phase, yeah.
In fact, Max is our fire chief from Ypsilanti, and we talked for maybe about a year about whether or not this was an acceptable idea to think about, and it was. And then the idea was how do you make it work, right? And so we picked a number. We looked at his electric bills, and we picked a number of just 50 kilowatts. What would it take to put 50 kilowatts on this roof, right? And that's less than what they would need to be 100% solar power. And and I'm just going to run through the numbers real quickly here, and this is the way I kind of visualize it. If I called up one of these contractors, it's about $3 a watt to put 50 kilowatts on a roof. So that's $150,000, right? So you can go out, try and find $150,000 and make that project happen. If you could get volunteer labor and help on permits and things like that, you could probably get that down to near $2 a watt. Okay, so now you're at $100,000. And then the real clever thing we figured out how to do, by luck actually, is monetizing the tax credit. So there's a 30% federal tax credit out there that homeowners can take advantage of. So if I put solar on my house, it costs me $15,000 to do my taxes, I get $5,000 back, so I save 30% on this. Municipalities, nonprofits can't take advantage of that. So there's many companies, but we use Chart House Energy in Muskegon. And so instead of buying the material, in this case from McNulty McKay, for like $100,000, we're going to be $2 a watt, so we're $100,000. So instead of buying that material from McNulty McKay for $100,000, we leased it from Chart House Energy. So Chart House was able to buy the same material, and instead of selling it to us, he leases it to us, and he does what's called a pre-buyout lease. And so we pay him $70,000. We have the panels on our roof, we get full value, we get all the electricity, we don't own them. He owns them for 6 years, and at the end of the 6 years, then we own them. And the reason he holds title to the panels is because then he writes them off his taxes. He collects the 30% federal tax credit and then passes that on through us. So went from 150 to 100. Now we're down in the neighborhood of 70. And then we got lucky. We had a person give a donation of $25,000. And in the end, I think the city kicked in like 30, 35, something like that. So 35 was the end number. We started at 150, we're down to 35. So that's how we were able to do it. And we put on 50 kilowatts. It took us 1 day to do it. We had the volunteers. There's a, I don't know, how much time do I have? I don't want to. I don't want to blow your budget here. I don't know if everybody's seen this. I think I'm just going to go through this 2-minute video because this kind of explains it all.
Can you go full screen on it too? That way the audience can see it better.
This is fancy. Oh, we get music too. Okay. There we go. I also have friends with drones. So this video was made for free. So this is the fire station. It's 2 levels, an upper level and a lower level. And it also has a tower, so we put a time-lapse camera in the tower. These are some of our volunteers. I want you to notice that we have a, not a guardrail, but we have cones around the edge with yellow flagging to alert people at the edge of the roof. The installation is done with these, this is called the Unirack ballasted mounting system. So there's no penetrations in the roof. This is a new roof. You have these little baskets, and you basically put in a number of concrete blocks into there to hold the panels onto the roof with just weight. It was kind of fun. I mean, it was kind of crazy. We had about a dozen volunteers, and I think we finished it in 8 hours or something like that. And what was nice was I was there. All the volunteers didn't show up at once. This is the original project. So I would show 2 or 3 people how to do it, and it's very repetitive. And so once you show a couple people how to do it, boom, they're off. I said, you know, start here, go that way, and then I'd grab another group of people, train them, start here, go that way. So it was really easy to train. And there's no electrical work here. This is all just nuts and bolts and mostly a lot of lifting. The material was bought from McNulty McKay through Charthouse, and they delivered it on pallets. And we were lucky that the firemen and our Department of Public Services was able to use their equipment to push it all up on the roof. So between fire trucks and front-end loaders, they got it all up on the roof. And then once it was all done, there is an electrical box called an optimizer that goes underneath some of the panels. The next installation. So I was able to hang, or another volunteer and I were able to hang these electrical boxes, but we didn't wire anything together. And then as part of the deal, we hired John Wakeman, who's actually in Ann Arbor here, who officially took the power from the panels and ran it into the building and connected it to their electrical system. So that's how it was. And then we did that for 2 years, and then he says, well, we're saving so much money, let's buy some more. So about a month ago, we bought another 52 panels, had some more volunteers show up, and we put another 52 panels up. And that was 2 hours maybe. You guys were trained, experts.
We saved about $6,000 a year was the first phase that we reinvested immediately, the second one.
I'm sorry, how many?
We saved $6,000 a year
$6,000 a year the first year.
for the first year.
Okay.
So up to 3 years, we got $18,000, and we bought the extra 52 panels.
So you took the savings to buy the second round?
Yeah, our council agreed with that, and they're very, very supportive.
I think initially they calculated the payback period to be 5 years.
Yes.
on
Yeah,
the
it
first system.
went faster.
It went faster.
Well, because of the $25,000.
Yeah,
We didn't have to.
So Charthouse, you didn't use them for the second round?
we did. Same, the exact same program.
Same thing.
Same approach. But your match came from the savings from the, I got it, okay.
We didn't have a donation for the second one, but we still got
Right.
30%. 30% is a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And so it works nice.
Did you have someone do a structural analysis of the roof to make sure
We-
before
we,
you started
I've-
putting all that extra ballasted load on, or?
We work with, I've worked with Chuck Holcomb.
Yeah, he's
He's on our
commissioner.
commission.
He's just
Okay.
not here tonight.
Yeah, and he's looked at roofs for me before. I believe he looked at this roof, and it's a big concrete roof, so it's not, but you're right, you do put a couple of tons up there.
So what was the biggest barrier you faced?
None. I mean, IPSI's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, from kind of a little side joke here is when I did the first one at City Hall, you know, I went to the mayor and said, hey, you know, mind if I do this? And he says, you know, knock yourself out, you know, if you can do it, do it. So that's how this is all kind of been snowballing. And actually, that's been very nice. So we kind of warmed up with IPSI slowly. We've done some small ones, and then we did their DPS on their truck port. We did both of the community centers. And in all these cases, I'm either monetizing something or I'm getting a donation or something. And so by the time this project comes along, they're all like, where do I sign? You know, so there's really no barriers to do this. I do have pictures, I mean, it's a flat roof. This is what the inverters look like. So initially, there were 3 inverters, so there's, the initial installation was 176 panels, which is a lot of panels, and I don't know how many blocks, a couple hundred concrete blocks. So there is a lot of movement of material. And then the expansion was 52 panels. So the original system, all that power got wired in conduit, and I actually volunteered my own time and helped John with the conduit runs and running the wires and all that. And then all of it goes into the building, and then these are the inverters that convert the DC to AC. And that's their electrical service. Maybe I'll skip on this. There's the panels. So, I mean, you can see there was quite a bit of work. Again, a lot of credit goes
That's
to
the
the front.
racking, right? In that case, that's the racking.
That's the panels, yeah, the racks.
Yep.
So the racks are held down by a cement block.
Yes.
So how much wind can one of those panels take before it scoots across the roof?
So to be honest, company does all this for you. So Unirac, you tell Unirac what you want to do. They know what the zoning laws for this area, so we design for 100-mile-an-hour winds and a 25-mile-an-hour snow load. And we tell them what kind of panels, and they do a pattern. Actually, we iterated about 3 or 4 times because there's a lot of obstacles up there on the lower roof. And then they would say, okay, put the panels out like this, and it's kind of funny, they give me a little map. There's 2 panels here, 2 blocks here, 1 block here, 3 blocks here. And it makes a little bit of sense. Basically, there's more blocks on the perimeter and fewer in the center. But you follow the map, and in theory, right, it's their problem if it blows off the roof. It's our problem, but it's.
It's also, the wind's blowing typically east to west, and these are facing north and south, so the wind shoots underneath them. This is pretty well state-of-the-art now, using these kinds of bricks on a 15-degree angle.
A 10. This is a
10 10-degree angle, sorry.
You skipped the important picture
There you
going up. Right there,
Lunch?
there is our Chairman
Oh,
Appleyard
the Chairman Appleyard,
There's lots of pictures.
eating instead of being up on the roof.
No, he was,
We were all eating at the same time.
so I mean, there it is. So the firemen did a lot of, like this picture here. There are these metal clips that go on the corner of all the baskets, and so there's a lot of assembly work, and this was all done on the floor. Actually, this looks like it's
all
on the
on the
roof.
roof, yeah.
The second time we did it on the ground. But, you know, those guys right there probably did that for a couple hours, I think.
Do you have volunteers to clean off the snow in the winter?
No, we don't worry about it because Michigan gets what's called 4 hours of peak sun, and that includes snow cover. So this is basically zero maintenance. Although I will say,
You want to show that to them?
yeah. I will say that I was a little not impressed with Solar Edge, which is the company we use for the inverters and the optimizers, because we've had 6 of them fail now.
Wow.
Yeah, we had two fail. Actually, we had 3 fail right when we started. And then when I went to fix those 3, but they're real good. I mean, I got replacements within a week, so it's just a hassle.
Those were the optimizers?
Yeah, so 3 failed right at the beginning. And then it was kind of ironic because I went and got them fixed and I repaired the system, and then 2 more fell out. But then after that, they were good for a couple of years, and then there was 1 more that I just fixed actually 2 days ago. But luckily on this roof, it's a piece of cake to swap them because it's not, you know, underneath because it's on a flat roof. So as you can see, this comes from Unirac. So when you order your system, they design this and they give you all the specs on the wind load and everything else. And then this is the map that we would follow to say how many blocks go in each basket.
I have a question.
Yeah. Well-
Is this
or does the energy all go into the building?
This is all net metering. So all
Okay.
the energy does go into the building, they
Right.
consume what they do, what they need, and then any excess gets exported out.
Right, and does Chart House handle that whole?
No, Chart
setup?
House is, in this particular case, they're out of the picture. They're basically just leasing us the material.
Okay,
I have worked on other projects, if you want, I can talk about those, is, where he actually, did the whole installation without any volunteer labor. And it cost more, but then he was able to structure it, this was for the truck port, and I can show you pictures of it. So instead of, so we bought everything from Chart House. We gave him a down payment, and then he structured payments for 6 years. So in our case with the firehouse, there were no payments. We made the one payment up front, and then there's no payments. We don't own them, but we don't make any payments, and then after 6 years, we own them. For the truck port, we put down a down payment, and then we're gonna make payments for 6 years. And he structures the payment such that the payment is 90% of the value of the electricity that I would have bought from the power company. So if I'm spending $100 every month with DTE, he structures the payment so that I pay $90 to Chart House for 6 years. And then, so that was, that way there was no volunteer labor, then he did everything. And in that case, then he's monitoring the system, and he's actually guaranteeing that we're making the power, and he does his billing based on what the inverter is producing.
David, if I just do sort of a back of the envelope calculation, $9,000 a year savings, times 25 years.
9 or was it 6?
Six.
Well, now,
Well,
but
it's
now
gonna
it'll
be
be
more
nine.
It's gonna be more now.
Oh, now with the additional panels, right?
So
So
for
maybe
the sake, for the sake of argument, let's use 9. So that's $225,000 over 25 years, and you're paying roughly $445,000 to Chart House, because that's $9,000 a year times 5 years, which is a net savings or net income to you guys somewhere in between 150 and 180,000. Is that near the numbers you would work with?
You're gonna have to do the numbers again.
Those are two separate projects.
Yeah, I think you're
All right.
mixing
Yeah.
They are two separate
So for the
projects, but-
firehouse, we make no payments. We paid him, what was the number now? $60,000 up front,
Okay,
and that's it. We just
All right.
one-time payment, and then we're saving the $6,000 every year.
okay.
In the DPS truck port project,
But after 5 years, you don't pay him, right?
we calculated that after
We
5
calculated
years,
it,
we
okay.
would have, because I'm paying electricity
Right,
anyways.
right.
So I had to come up with this $60,000. And actually, of that 60, now 25 is the donation.
Okay.
So that then ours is like
Let me
35.
ask the question a different way. Over the life of the system, how much money, cash, do you
I don't
guys
know, it's a
generate?
lot.
Roughly, 100,000 at least?
Yeah, something like that. It's gonna be lots.
So how would the city of Ypsilanti come up with $100,000 to hand you over, you know, if you went to them and said, I want $100,000 for something else, how could you, what's your prospect of you being able to get that? This is one way to generate that $100,000 yourself,
Yeah.
right?
It was not enough. They would have said no.
They'd say no, right?
They did, actually.
There's one.
So I guess
We had
that,
55 on the energy fund, if I remember, so I was not able to go over that.
right. So I remember when we did the second Ray, Wayne, myself, and
Chuck was there.
Chuck was there. I talked to you a bit about this, and you said something to the effect that you couldn't understand how any city could not do this. And I assume that's based in
Right.
part on the fact that this makes money for you, and you wouldn't be able to get that
So,
money any other way.
I'm gonna answer your question in a different way.
All right.
So there, if this is such a great, if this is, money falling from the sky, why isn't everybody doing it, right? And the reason is because it's a return on investment. On a typical home, it's 7 years to get your money back. You have to come up with an upfront payment, which is like a used car, and then you have to wait 7 years. I've gone to many businesses inside Ypsilanti and said, why don't you do this? It's a positive return on investment. And the guy at Michigan Ladder says, Dave, I can buy a new milling machine.
Yeah.
It'll pay for itself in a year. why am I even gonna think about this? I even went to St. Joe's, I actually got a meeting with the head of facilities at St. Joe's Hospital, and he pulls out a binder, and he says, 1-year payback, 2-year payback. So that's why people don't just jump at that, because it's a 7-year payback. We got it shortened, not by monetizing the tax rate, you need to have that already, but by having a donation in there, that shortened it to 5.
So
From
do
the
you think
7.
that's the sweet spot for a city, 5 years?
I don't know anything about finances of cities.
By the way, for the residential systems, the payback in Ann Arbor is even higher because.
Because of your taxes.
Because the city assessor assesses taxes, which
And actually,
increases the
this is-
payback another roughly 50%,
And
makes it
so
over
that's
10.
actually another motivator for your fire station, is because that doesn't affect your
Correct.
nonprofits or
True.
your municipal buildings.
Yep, good
And
point.
so this would be one way, or a cheap way, to get more solar inside of Ann Arbor, because instead of forcing people to pay this property tax, you sidestep that whole issue if you could put it on all your nonprofits and municipal buildings. Yeah.
Has this model been discussed at all with Ypsilanti Public Schools? We have a lot of public
Yep, well,
school,
we have it on 2
high
schools
school
already.
students here in the audience and using volunteer labor. It would seem to me that this would be a model that would be great for public schools doing the same thing. They could also go to Chart House. They have students that could help out with the
Yeah,
labor,
Do it.
with a little bit of
Don't go to
supervision.
meetings, get out of this meeting, just do it. No, that's very good. So we have, Adams School has a small array. I was actually, the Ecology Center had a program a couple of years ago that put solar on schools, and Adams was one of those. We got another donation that helped us put it on High High School. In that case, we still didn't have the students help. Students gets a little more tricky because they're younger, more inexperienced, and prone to accidents. But I know Chart House just did a project at Bloomfield Hills High School, and there is a video of the kids literally, building the array. So if it's a ground mount, and I would recommend a ground mount for a school, because then they can interact with it. But if it's a ground mount, then the kids aren't climbing ladders, and it's so much easier for them to just put it up on a ground mount array.
If I can ask a
Yeah.
follow-up question, did you do anything liability-wise? Did the city require waivers from volunteers, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I was kind of surprised there. I've worked on past projects for the city, and they do have a standard indemnification form that you can sign. I don't know why we didn't use them on this one. Mostly it was firemen and public works people, but yeah, I would recommend that.
Okay.
So David, I guess Chief as well, how have other fire departments around the country looked at this project? What kind of feedback have you gotten from other people who've looked at this and were curious about it? And I know you did an article, I think, in Fire Magazine.
Firehouse Magazine, that's another reason to do this, is to, and that's kind of my Ypsilanti model I'm going to talk about at that meeting, is you do something and then you talk about it, and you get money, and you do something again, you talk about it. So we were able to get published in a national magazine to kind of show off Ypsilanti's fire department as, being cool. So that's another motivating.
So is
PR
that what
factor.
other fire departments think, that you guys are cool, or do they think you're nuts?
No, Chart House is actually, Chart House has done 2 other firehouses.
Yeah, there's some, is that Trimac, do they have one? And I think they get a full grant with those Weiss batteries.
Yeah, and then didn't you say Augusta Township called you?
Augusta wants to look at it, yeah. So it's taking some traction.
Do you consider this a resiliency project, where if, there would be a supply issue from DTE that at
No,
least you're,
it's,
no? So you don't
this
have
is
any
all-
battery backup or
No,
anything like
they
that
have
either?
a generator set.
They do,
And a
okay.
transfer switch, so
Okay,
they lose power, they're gonna switch over to the generator, and
okay,
solar panels will be dead.
yeah,
You could, I'm not sold on batteries yet.
yeah. They're
There's a
expensive.
flavor of that, though, that starts to float around. Some fire stations are emergency centers for a community.
When he speaks and he's not at the
Yeah.
microphone.
Sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry about that. Some fire stations are designed emergency centers for some communities,
and mostly small community. So they get a tornado coming out and there's no more power. They designed this fire station with solar panel or some other type of power system, but they have batteries with it. So that would be a good application for this fire station. And I think they start to have grants designed for that if it's the design emergency center for the city.
Right.
That electric vehicle charging, have you looked at that, or does it have the capability to do that? Or are you doing?
That one doesn't, but I actually just finished a project where the inverter comes with an L2 charging plug on it, so you can charge things with that. And you reminded me of another point was, they just got a new roof, and we kind of were unfortunate that they did the roof before we did the solar, because I learned that Chart House will also include a new roof in a solar project. So there's this tax credit out there, which, from what I understand, can be interpreted loosely or in different ways. And Chart House has done several projects where they've put a new roof on the building and put solar on at the same time, and then called the new roof part of the solar installation. And I would sleep at night with no problem, because you'd never put solar on a crappy roof, right? You'd want to replace the roof. And so you could definitely see the motivation for replacing the roof as part of the solar project. What that does is that now gives you a 30% discount on a new roof. And what that basically does is gives you free solar. And Chart House has done this on another project of mine, where the guy was going to replace his roof. He had a quote from a roofing contractor. He gave it to Chart House, and Chart House says, I'll do the same thing with solar. Basically took the 30% off on the re-roof and was able to apply the solar, fit the solar system within the cost, the savings of the 30%. So if you're doing any municipal buildings that need a new roof, you'd be dumb not to put solar on at the same time, because it'll just save you money.
I actually talked to a tax consultant about that, and he said to be sure about doing that and not getting any negative repercussions from the IRS, what you should do is include something with the roof that, for example, increases the R value, where you add some insulation or something like that, and then you're safe for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think, Josh, if we looked into something like that, I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt also to increase the insulation too, because a lot of these roofs on these buildings are poorly insulated. And then if you can wrap that all up together and get the tax write-off on both the roof and the solar, then, and Solar Faithful would be the same way too, if we did it on a House of Worth. They should look at their roofs potentially too.
A little rude awakening is the fact that if you do have batteries for resilience, and you don't charge them 100% DC from solar, you can't take the tax credit for the battery. There's a loophole in the law on that too, so that makes Dave's point on batteries a little less attractive if they're not fully DC. And if you DC charge them, your array just got a lot bigger because you're doing two things at once.
So what would you do differently, David, that you did on this project? You had a do-over.
Nothing. But here's our expansion. We were going to, John Wakeman was going to bring, he had an elevator to move all the material to the roof. And I had so many people. That's what I think is fun. So push everything aside, this was fun. I mean, we had the mayor, we had the chief up there, we had city council people up there, we had teenagers. We had one guy, I think he was like 70 years old. Well, no, some other guy.
What do you mean by that?
And we had a real good sense of community. I don't know, Wayne, did you have a good time? Did you have a good time?
Oh, yeah. I came for both of them.
I mean,
Not so much the first time.
so building community, right? All of that, good stuff. And so before John could show up with his elevator, actually that's my neighbor there. He says, well, let's just carry him up, and boom, there, before we can get the elevator there, we already had all the material up on the roof just by people handing it over. So. And then this is a U of M student. She was kind of funny. She came at like noon, and we're done. And I was like, well, I'm screwing around with these optimizers. I started doing some wiring, and so I helped her, or she helped me, do some wiring. And so, I mean, from a student perspective, there's a good view of kind of the crowd that we drew. And I'll say half of them are probably from Ann Arbor. We had people from EMU, we had some EMU professors there, neighbors. Oh, there he is. In action. I don't know if you ever look at this, you look like you got a halo. It's glowing. All right. Let me maybe just close with one more picture here. So here's another one, and we're working on a sunshot challenge. I think you guys are too. And this is Chart House again. So here's a building in a low income. This is like the meeting house, a community center for a low income housing project, and they built this building from scratch. And so not only did he include the roof, but he included some of the structure. He says, some of these 2x4s are part of the solar installation. And then he used a little bit of his own money, and we put 20 kilowatts up on this roof. And it was beautiful because we hired 4 people from the housing project and trained them how to do solar, and then brought them up on the roof. We trained them. This is, we're a little better here. We have, well, maybe not in that picture. We had ropes. We did fall training. These are these guys, and they were doing it. So we trained local people. We hired them. We paid them a living wage, and then we were able to put solar on a low-income housing building and save them money. So it's all good. And then, and then, man, it's always good to have friends with drones. And these are fantastic pictures. And then, like a month later, we did it again. We went back to our DPW's truck port. We had 5 kilowatts on there from before. We ripped it off, added 20 kilowatts, and we trained another 4 people on how to install solar, and they're up on that roof installing. So that'd be another aspect. If you don't want to use volunteers, maybe you can make a jobs program out of this to train people and hire them to put it up on your roof. And if you work with Chart House, he can help you with all that.
Dave, do you see any difference in doing a firehouse versus some other city building? I mean, if we had in Ann Arbor, we got 5 buildings we're looking at put solar on.
I would look at the one with the
How would we prioritize?
The one with the worst roof.
The one with the worst roof, okay.
The one with the worst roof, because you want to monetize the tax credit and on the roof.
Okay.
And then look at solar exposure. On the list, which is nice, is looking at public exposure. So the one problem I have with the firehouse is nobody can see it.
Huh.
It's hidden up there unless you look at it. So this is why I love this project that we just finished. If you're ever coming into Ann Arbor, look at that baby. 105 panels.
That's not a church, right?
It was a church. It got bought by a friend of mine who turning it into a performance space. But that's a 10-12 pitch. Makes it a little more exciting. I wouldn't put volunteers on that roof. But that's beautiful because everybody coming in on Washington Avenue now, on Cross Street or whatever, drives right by it. All right.
So I know also you talked about the training. You do training for other fire departments or others on
Chart House did all that.
Charter House.
Yeah, they that's his model, is he wants to find local people, train them how to do this, and then hire them.
And what about training for like inspectors and things like that? Ypsilanti inspectors
So
look at this as a way to figure out how to look at John's house next time better? And some, I've seen some inspectors that weren't quite up to
I will say
speed.
some inspectors don't know what they're doing. For our Soul Smart Gold Award, I actually held a training session for the building department to educate them in solar.
So you have any advice for us?
Just do it. That's,
Okay. All right, guys, let's go.
you know, just get a quote. That's where you start. Get a quote. If you're going to attack a building with a bad roof, get a quote for the roof. Get 2 or 3 quotes for the roof. Get 2 or 3 quotes for the solar. Figure out what your budget is. Talk. I keep saying Chart House, but I think Nova Consultants can monetize this tax credit too, and I'm sure there's other companies that can do this. And monetize the tax credit. Find out what the bottom dollar is, and put out a notice in, to the city and say, to the residents, and say, hey, let's do this. And you can help. Get up on the roof.
Did you do any education for the community about this project? Or
Not
Open houses
specific to
or
this
anything?
project. We did a bunch of projects where I was doing ribbon cuttings at the end of each project. And that's good. And over the 12 years, I've done 250 solar presentations. I think I'm going to add this one to it. And I've reached like 5,000 people, face to face. And that's maybe that's why we're so good in IPSI, is because I just keep talking. Every Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, library, I've done several at the library, just trying to just keep getting that message out there.
Right? I don't know whether you want to say anything about your,
No, I mean, you probably nailed it out, you know.
Okay.
You talk about training, one thing we did as far as firefighters,
Because we get all of those, and firefighters don't know to fight fire when there's those
Sure.
type of things, I mean, things happen. So one of our captain took us training and trained other fire department as far as the safety concern that there is, where to shut off the power before you
Sure.
put some water on those things.
Right. Right.
So that's one thing we did.
Great.
Excellent.
Well, thank you. That
Thank
was
you
a
very, very
wonderful
much.
presentation. You're doing fabulous work. Keep it up. Be careful on those roofs.
Putting Ann Arbor to shame.
Just getting it done.
All right.
Alright, so for the next part of this agenda, probably not as inspiring as the presentation, but we have some housekeeping things to take care of for 2019.
So should I introduce this resolution so we can deal with it next meeting? Or?
It's up to you if you want to. That was something I didn't know if we wanted to hold off on or.
Well, they gotta have it for a month, right?
Okay,
It's-
yeah, if you want to go ahead.
So,
We don't have copies of it.
I sent out to everybody as a follow-on to this presentation, a proposed resolution that we all have to have and look at for a month or so, according to our bylaws. So I'm introducing this tonight, and it's essentially everybody should have a copy of this. Maybe that's a good question. Does everybody have a copy of this? All right. So let me just run through this quickly then. I'm proposing a resolution that would require Ann Arbor Emergency Management and Renewable Energy Plans give priority to solar installations on emergency responder buildings. Whereas climate change risks are regional in nature and pose special challenges to local communities such as drought, deluge, and rain bombs and related toxic substance overflow release, heat and cold extremes, and related social unrest. And whereas in December 2012, with the passage by the Ann Arbor City Council of the Climate Action Plan, the City of Ann Arbor committed to an ambitious multi-strategy vision to address climate change by reducing its community-wide greenhouse emissions 8% by 2015, 25% by 2025, and 90% by 2050 relative to the year 2000 baseline carbon dioxide equivalent emission levels. And whereas City Council unanimously reaffirmed local commitment to climate action in Resolution R-17-238, resolution committing the City of Ann Arbor to adopt, honor, and uphold the Paris Climate Agreement goals. And whereas Ann Arbor's hazardous mitigation plan recognizes that climate change poses special risk to local emergency planning and response, noting that, quote, all of Ann Arbor, including current and future buildings, populations, infrastructure, and other assets, is vulnerable to severe winter hazards, and, quote, all of Ann Arbor is vulnerable to extreme heat, including all current and future buildings, infrastructure, and populations. And whereas emergency planners typically rely on 3 approaches to emergency power: utility-generated power from fossil fuels in accordance with the Michigan Emergency Management Plan; 2, Michigan Public Service Commission's energy-related emergency planning, preparedness, response, and recovery responsibilities; and 3, on-site backup emergency generators. And whereas because of their regional nature, climate emergencies often involve a disruption to utility power, and large-scale regional emergencies pose competing recovery demands on utility systems, the Michigan Public Service Commission, and backup local generator capabilities. And whereas many communities are adding on-site solar generation as an emergency power option to augment utility power and portable generators in climate emergencies. And whereas emergency responders, such as police, fire, and ambulance, are ideal candidates for solar installations on building roofs, carports, and adjacent grounds where solar power can be stored in battery packs, used to directly charge electric vehicles, power communications and medical equipment, provide emergency street lighting, and power from mobile emergency power stations. Resolved, because of the special emergency response duties, emergency responder buildings should be given priority for solar installations in Ann Arbor renewable energy and emergency management plans as a way to address both climate change risks and to augment traditional power approaches during climate change-related emergencies that disrupt power. So I'm proposing that we consider this and address it, deal with it at the January meeting, because the December meeting is a planning meeting. Thank you.
Great.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Look forward to looking at them in January.
Do we have that, did you send that to all commissioners, or you said you'd sent it out already?
So I
I
think
don't remember seeing
this
it.
was going to be just kind of a primary reading of it.
Okay,
and then
yeah.
We've considered it
Yeah.
more, and yeah.
But, so
and
you'll
we'll
send
make
it,
sure
it'll
that-
be attached then to the minutes or something like that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
for sure.
Thank you.
I'll make sure I send it out. Okay. As far as, so housekeeping, if you guys see the meeting notice, the
Yes.
page there. Basically, we're just going to be, so similar to a resolution, we have to approve as a commission the times that we meet for 2019. I pretty much set all of the meetings for Tuesday, similar to what we have now. So it's more of a formality, but I figured we'd present it, and if anyone has any issues, let us know, and otherwise we can pass it. The only other thing I want to say, I have been asked to make sure to keep record of attendance for next year, keeping to missing 3 different meetings. Commissioners are supposed to not miss more than 3, so that is something, starting in 2019, we'll definitely be keeping record of.
Good.
Outstanding.
So do you want to pass, I guess?
The only thing that might change is if we have joint meetings with the Environmental Commission, which
Yes.
there's some discussion going on about having one in January or February, because the administrator would like to talk with both
Yeah.
commissions, and I'm not sure whether we'll have separate, force them to come to 2 meetings instead of 1, or whether we'll try and do a joint
We're
meeting.
still-
That's still up in the air.
Still trying to figure out the logistics on that one, but
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so do you guys want to pass the?
Sure. I'll entertain a motion to pass the Energy Commission planned meetings for calendar year 2019.
So moved?
Second? Second from Commissioner McCumber. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, passes.
All right, great. This is going to come a little bit further into the committee updates, but I did also want to talk a little bit about the way that we structure the committee, the subcommittee meetings. I know that there's been some confusion as far as doodle polls and when everyone gets the kind of doodle polls back to us, and timing as far as when the subcommittees actually meet. So one thing that I was thinking about doing was having set schedules for the subcommittees. Probably on, so every Tuesday, there would be a different subcommittee that would meet. So for example, the second Tuesday, that would be when Energy Commission meets. The third Tuesday, we might have an EV meeting, fourth, so on and so forth. So that way, it's just easy to kind of remember. It's easy for people to come to if they're interested in it. And with a set schedule, we can also post that, so that way it's known for the rest of the year. So as soon as I put that
Would those
together-
be at 6 o'clock as well? Or you
Yeah,
think-
I'm thinking somewhere between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, just to give enough people time to get to City Hall, but also that it doesn't run so late that, you know, we're going into burning the midnight oil. So that was kind of my preference. As long as everyone on the commission thinks it's a good idea, I'll proceed with that.
a better time because the parking opens up.
Okay,
That's
fair
true.
enough. Okay,
I have a question related to meetings.
sure.
Commissioner Hookham and I met on Sunday, and one of the things that we talked about, and actually the Environmental Commission is going through this process right now, is sort of identifying not only the meeting schedule, but what might be specific topics for those. And input was requested from commissioners, not necessarily what topic would be at one particular meeting, but what are the topics that should be covered, and then laying those out in the calendar year. And I think maybe that's something that we should consider doing. I don't know that we want to do that through the whole year, but at least X months out. And I think one of the things that Chuck mentioned at the time that the Environmental Commission hasn't done, but it seems to me makes sense for both commissions, or frankly for any commission, is not only what commissioners would like to cover in that, but what in particular the city and staff want of the commission, and where can we help, where can we advise, where can we advance a topic, so that we're not necessarily pushing the agenda, at least from our side, but also that there's a real balance back and forth between the city and its goals and the work plan for the new Office of Sustainability and Innovation, and what can we do to advance those topics. So maybe we think about that, maybe you send an email out saying, what would we like to cover, but also what would you like from us?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I did see in some ways the subcommittees that we're putting together is kind of embodying some of that. So some of the major pushes that we have break down into smaller groups. With that said, it would be interesting to see how we can maybe feed that back into the larger group with the Energy Commission. So maybe in December we can have this as part of the discussion as well.
I'd like to just add something,
Yeah.
John, to see what you think of this idea. But along with this, that we're charged with all or part of the SMART framework in our recommendation. In other words, you know, we're asked to come up with the idea, or we're asked to come up with metrics, or we're asked to come up with something, but we use the discipline of the SMART framework in this committee structure, and that the challenge, or when the committee is given a task to do, it's broken out, we want you to do this part of the SMART framework. So we get some specificity, so we know when we pass this on, what still has to be done.
Thanks for bringing that up. Actually, that was my recommendation, or part of my recommendation for the Environmental Commission, and that was that we take all of the metrics that are related to the Environmental Commission and break them up into, let's say, 4, and cover 1/4 of them in one meeting, where the next 2 meetings could then deal with ad hoc topics or whatever's coming up, and then the next quarter we deal with the next set of 4, and next set of goals, and the next set of goals, or metrics, I should say, and what are the related action plans, to your point, to make progress against those, and what's the progress on those actions, what are obstacles, what could the commission do to advance achieving the targets that are associated with each one of those sustainability framework dashboard metrics that we have. And we could potentially do the same thing with the Energy Commission. I don't think we have that many. We might have something like 6 or 6 metrics maybe.
Yeah.
So we could do that, in 3 meetings where we take 2 metrics and then look at those in particular, and then talk about action plans associated with those. We could have reports from outside groups that relate to those particular metrics. For example, I'll use one from the Environmental Commission. One of the metrics is the health of the watershed. We developed a new metric that's now on a 1 to 100 scale. It's very easy to trend. The Huron River Watershed Council has a big role to play. They might have a report associated with that in that meeting. So the metric, the action plans, and reports would all align in that one meeting. And I think that's sort of what you're getting at, Mark.
So, Jack, I wonder if you could weigh in on this. You've been pointed in your advice to us that we need to tighten up our recommendations, apply metrics to them. I wonder if you think the discussion we're having here, is that going in the direction you think we need to go? And if not, what would you suggest we do differently?
I think this is the right direction. I have to turn on my microphone first. I think this is the right direction. I think we need to set a goal. We have to have a baseline. We have to have measurable goal lines along the way, and then we have to have a budget for accomplishing that. So, yeah. We often express good intentions, which go to council, and they ratify those good intentions, and then nothing comes of those good intentions. And so, to the extent that we can identify what we believe should be done, and how it should be done, and how much it'll cost to do it, and what the outcome of that is, I think that helps push our agenda along.
Commissioner Huckam.
So I'd like to kind of tack on, and I'm not going to go down the wrath of my email exchange that's been taking place over the last few weeks. So I just want to hit one key topic for everybody's purpose. And I guess I'm kind of the historian around here because I'm one of the older dudes. But so, you know, back in the day when this Energy Commission started, it was City Council that sparked it. And there was almost the whole Energy Commission was City Council. So they basically embodied some issues, topics, critical topics of interest to the city to push forward on. And if you read those back in the 80s, you'd say, wow, these guys are pretty forward-thinking, great stuff. Let's move on with these things. Let's make them happen. So in some instances, they did take place. There was a lot of movement on energy efficiency back in the 80s. So forward-thinking, a lot of good things happen. What I've noticed, and maybe again my history buff side of me, I see a lot of effort from our commission to promote, espouse ideas. We pass a lot of resolutions. Other than maybe some feedback we get from Commissioner Eaton, I don't think we get any feedback from council on whether we're off base, are we going in the right direction. I think that I'm on a National Energy Journal. I'm one of the associate editors. If we're not accountable and we're not doing the right thing, we get feedback directly from our readers, from our editor, from everybody that says, hey, you guys need to be focused on something else. And so we get that feedback very quickly, and that keeps us on point. It keeps us productive. It keeps us moving the bar for the public forward. I'm sensing we need some of that, and that's might be my own opinion, but I think we would really benefit as a body to make the next step with our council telling us, hey, this makes sense or doesn't. That feedback's incredibly valuable because we only have so much volunteer time. And I think if we had better alignment that way, it'd be great. Josh, same thing with staff. I mean, you've got a lot of people here who have a lot of skill sets, have been in the marketplace for, in some cases, 40 years. I don't know about Wayne, but I'm 40 plus. Been doing this a long time. We now have a little bit more time on our hands a lot of times to help you guys and help staff and help commission and help the sustainability group that's now out there. John's done a wonderful job promoting that, and I think he's an exemplary of some of the things we can do to work better as a team and move the city along. And we see evidence of like climate change, starting to impact us quite a bit. There's maybe disagreement scientifically about what's going on, but the main message is we don't have a lot of time here on our hands. So some of us are getting older and want to make a difference. We gotta start making some stepwise, definite changes here, or we're not going to get anywhere. So the message is, how do we better work together? Commission to staff, commission to council. Are we going in the right direction, or aren't we? And just tell us point blank. Maybe one of the messages is you're too big, or maybe the message is focus on climate change or climate action plan only. Forget about solar, or forget about this, or forget about that. Focus only your efforts on this topic, and then our group can have a better critical mass. Fragment-wise, our subcommittees probably don't get as much done as maybe we could if we had that direction. So I'm just pointing this out, my opinion only. I didn't canvass anyone else. I just throw it out there for talk.
It is a problem. And I can remember I don't remember the year, but it was probably 2006 or 2008. We gave a 40-minute presentation. Slide has a whole lot of things to deal with. You know,
Absolutely.
Energy is only one very small portion, and they rely on us. I mean, it's sort of chicken and egg on some respects, because they rely on us. We're the experts supposedly, or at least I hope they think we are. And so they're relying on us to suggest things, but certainly more input from council would be very welcome. And because of our limited amount of time that we can spend on projects, we want to work on stuff that has some possibility of actually happening. So if we're not going to get support from council, then it'd be better if we knew it early on. So now, one of the things maybe we should do is, I think in our bylaws, we're supposed to have some kind of a report annually, and I am not one that likes to spend a whole lot of time doing reports or changing bylaws or any of that stuff. I'd rather do something that's meaningful, but one of the things that we could do is send something up to council saying, these are the things that we expect to work on, and we'd love your feedback on whether or not these are things that you want us to work on. And it should be pretty easy. We might not get much back, but we might get some good information.
So one of the things I've really tried to convey is that if we propose something that proposes a tangible result and how to do it, it'll get support. So at the meeting on November 19th, which is next Monday, I'm bringing forward a budget amendment that will pare down Dr. Stoltz's proposal to the two items that actually will have an impact on energy consumption. And that'll be the net zero housing project, which is not a small ticket item.
No.
That was the vast majority of her ask.
200,000.
And the other thing is the electric vehicle charging stations, because those meet both of our criteria for a budget amendment, which is that they're time sensitive. You know, to start the net zero housing project, we have to approve it now so that they're ready to go at the beginning of the next building season. They can't wait for the,
Right.
you know, the next fiscal year, you know. The electric vehicle chargers are time sensitive because, in fact, we've purchased those vehicles. And we're going to need to charge them.
Either that or an extension cord, right?
So, you know, there were a variety of things in there that will quite likely come up in the next budget year and are really topics for your normal budget deliberations, because we have to weigh a lot of things against each other, you know. So it's not that I don't want energy staff, or, I mean, sustainability staff to be well-paid, but it has to be part of our broader non-union salary study and part of our normal budget process. There were a variety of other things in there, like travel to other cities for conferences and things, that I don't think are really good steps for people who are trying to address sustainability. Jumping on a jet is not energy efficient. Sending a soon-to-retire employee to a conference doesn't make sense in a variety of different levels. So I don't want you to believe that you don't have the support of council. When you get to council, most often the resolutions that you send are unanimously passed, have support, but I'm here to warn you when we send stuff, the difficulty you're gonna, and I think that there was a fair amount of forewarning on the budget amendment issue. It's not a lack of support for taking tangible action. It's that it was a lot of money that some of it was debatable, you know. So I want you to be adventuresome. I want you to identify the building that you want to do the audit, do the whole process on, and how much that would cost, so that we can take that forward. But to generally state that we want to be net zero by X year doesn't do that.
No.
You know, so, again, I really do want you to understand that I'm here because I want this process to work. And I think that it doesn't hurt us to be pushy here, as long as you understand the parameters of the process that when I get to the council table, you know. We have a $108 million general fund budget, and we have to balance that between a variety of needs. You know, we have $10 million worth of needs in our fire department. I can't tell you what our sewer and our water infrastructure needs. It's just off the charts. There are so many needs in so many different ways that when we go, we need to be able to compete by showing what it's going to accomplish. And especially if we are going to reduce our carbon output or reduce our energy consumption, because energy consumption has a built-in savings over the long haul. That's an argument that we can make, and that's an argument that we can succeed in.
Well, it's important for us to be specific about what we want to do. On the other end of things, one of the things that I neglected to put forth in the energy report is that Portland just passed a clean energy ordinance. And what they're doing is they are taxing any corporation that does business within their community that has a gross annual budget of $1 billion. And they're going to have $30 million a year to do climate work. And that's what they think they need. Now, they're 6 times bigger than Ann Arbor, so that works out to $5 million a year is what we probably should be spending if we could figure out a way of generating that money. That's the report that John read earlier from the New York Times just shows how big the issue is and how much money we really need to be putting at it. And it's not throwing money away, it's investing in the future of people who are a lot younger than we are. So
2 items on that. First, Michigan restricts
Oh, I know that.
our ability to raise new revenues in the
Yes.
city.
Thank you, Mr. Headley.
Secondly, I'm not sure how many billion-dollar corporations we have in town. Maybe the
You
university.
might be surprised. Well, and that's another discussion.
If I can comment just briefly on this and sort of maybe tie all this together. I think we've had several meetings. I think, Jack, some of them may have been before you joined the Energy Commission, where the Environmental Commission and Energy Commission looked at the sustainability framework and the goals and the dashboard indicators with the metrics. And in line with what Mark mentioned earlier, having SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Each one of, we've identified goals and metrics for both energy and environmental metrics. And I think what Mark and Chuck and what you are saying is that our responsibility as, let's say, the city and the commission vis-a-vis residents is that we should be delivering positive outcomes for the residents of Ann Arbor. You know, there should be an improvement in water quality. There should be an improvement in greenhouse gas reductions. And everything that we do should be focused around that, either where it delivers directly a positive outcome and we see an improvement in a metric, or it's an enabler. And I agree with everything that you said, Jack, especially when it relates to things that the city does for municipal operations. But we have to remember that municipal operations are 1.3% of Ann Arbor's total greenhouse gas reductions. So if we do a project for the city, then yes, we can say, if we put solar on the Wheeler Center, it's going to cost this amount of money, and it's going to deliver this many metric tons, and there's a good payback on it, and there's a real clear line between doing this and getting a positive outcome that we can see in our metric. But the cap is addressed to all of Ann Arbor's greenhouse gas reductions, all 100% from the whole community, from transportation, from residential, industrial, and commercial. And the only way we're going to really help drive that is through enabling programs, where we won't be able to necessarily say, if we have this energy efficiency program, then we know for sure 100 people will do X, and they will save so many metric tons of CO2, and that will impact our goal. So that's going to be, I think, the difficulty that we're going to have vis-a-vis council, and also for the residents of Ann Arbor spending their money, is to be able to come up with programs that address what is going on in the community and reducing those greenhouse gas reductions, and having a clear line, which we all want to have in terms of accountability. If we do X, it will deliver Y. That's going to be more difficult.
I wanted to also say that with the Sustainability and Innovations Plan, if you guys have looked at the CAP, there are a lot of suggestions in there as to how best to reach our goals and our targets. Some of them are less or more feasible. Some of them, you have to invest more money into. Others. And so I think when creating the Sustainability and Innovation Plan in our office, we are really looking for programs that could in some ways go further than any other one individual action could do. So when we looked at, for example, time of marketing, we were looking at how the market could really pick up, the economic forces of the market could pick up on incentivizing energy audits in ways that if the city were to incentivize rebates, there just wouldn't be enough funding to be able to reach all the houses. So I think in some ways, the Sustainability and Innovation Plan, the one that we presented, really is in a way cohesive and tries to get at all of these different sectors by looking at the best way to do it for the less, for not as much money, time, and effort that it would take if we were actually to go through and look at all of the different recommendations for the CAP. So that was something that went into our planning as well.
Great, thank you. Anything else on that topic? If not, let's move along to updates. Committee updates.
We do have one other thing, which actually kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. So Energy Commission policy recommendations.
Sorry.
So from my understanding, City Council has a policy committee, and we had made recommendations. If you see City Council, the page labeled City Council has Energy Commission, Environmental Commission. These are basically some recommendations that we gave to City Council in the previous year as far as things to look at and kind of focus on. I just wanted to go through these and see if we want to add to them, if there's anything we want to change. Again, just kind of dealing with housekeeping and making sure that we're ready for 2019, since this is the last meeting that we'll be having outside of a work session in December. So the first bullet point here, pursue remedies that incent the installation of sustainable and renewable energy resources, including but not limited to residential and community solar and wind systems.
I'm not sure wind systems make sense inside city limits.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from, and
Okay, so let's do.
I just-
Yeah, we can get that.
we can
Take
take
that
that
one off.
off, I think.
Next one, pursue legislative remedies that remove
John?
disincentives. Yes.
I was just gonna add, there is a potential for a wind project if we were to use green space, the city's reserve. There's enough property to put something in that way.
Okay.
It's a credible use because we're not disrupting the rest of the land. So let's not strike it.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
Not too long ago, Pioneer High School was going to deploy a windmill. And we had a professor from the University of Michigan come to us and say, you shouldn't waste your time because Ann Arbor is not a good spot for attempting to capture the wind. You know, it's just not consistent or I don't know. Can you have a high-quality wind? However you say it in that terminology, this is not the place to seek.
It's not the best place, for sure.
Yeah.
And it all depends on what you're talking about using, too. The higher you can put something, the better the wind's going to be. So putting a small wind system out next to the bleachers in Pioneer High School really didn't make much sense. And small wind systems are notorious for ripping themselves apart.
Well, actually,
First-hand knowledge.
what killed it eventually was that it was too tall for its proximity to the airport.
Airport, yes, and that's certainly another
Yeah, so,
consideration. I went out to the Wheeler Center one day with Mr. Bricks and a helium balloon and took pictures showing how far up we could actually put one and not have it be in the airspace. So, yeah, no, we do have to be concerned about that.
There's ridge lines on the north side of town that are in the green space that need to be looked at. We used to
Yeah.
microsite, you know, from a Washington County perspective, out by Manchester is purely better. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a ridge line out there that's great.
Yeah.
But there are some viabilities, and it doesn't have to be a massive wind turbine that we build on the utility scale. It could be something vertical or unique, but it's probably not a focus. Let's just leave it there. and
Yeah, yeah.
It'll
There-
probably screen itself out.
There was also a period of time when they were redoing the line from the water treatment plant up to the lime pit next to the school, where we tried to get them to put a piece of conduit in to put a fairly good-sized wind system up there, but no, they didn't want to spend the money on the conduit, so. But that's another story. But it's a minor thing.
So we'll leave it in.
Yeah, we'll leave it in. You know, and it doesn't preclude the city buying into a wind farm someplace else in the state.
I've got a wind turbine that's literally on the football field in a high school down in Paulding, Ohio. I'd love to show you pictures. It's a 90-meter hub height wind turbine. This is not unsizable, 300 and something feet tall. The kids that play football love to see it. You know, it's part of the school environment now. I think they may have renamed their football team, but there's part of it there's always potential. Let's not screen out something.
Yeah,
This state.
yeah, and it's all depends on what you're trying to do. You know, if you get 30% instead of 40%, it may be fine if you're not looking for a profit, you know, which is what most wind farms are set up for, you know.
So let's leave it in and move on.
Yeah, okay, let's move on.
All right, the
We
next one.
digress.
The next one, pursue legislative remedies that remove disincentives for installation of sustainable and renewable energy resources, including but not limited to seeking statewide property tax exemptions for residential solar systems.
Hopefully, we're very close to being able to cross that one off.
Indeed, the city did that and council did that.
Yes.
So maybe one thing we could do, I still think pursue legislative remedies and remove disincentives makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we can get rid of that second after the comma. So that way it's not as specific
I agree.
to,
Period.
but we can continue to,
Mhm.
because there's a number of issues. And one of the things,
Community solar.
one of the things that I was thinking about, even looking at, for example, purple law, I mean, it really does go wide.
Oh, yes.
The things that we need to get involved in at the
Yeah, yeah.
legislative level, so. Okay, let's see. Pursue legislative remedies to support appropriate local government access to household utility data on gas and electricity used to support the upcoming city investment and community-facing energy programs. So this is mostly about data access.
Access to DTE's records, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Which
Okay,
makes
why don't you
sense.
just say, instead of pursue legislative remedies, why don't we just say, raise an army, and that's got about as,
Now, now.
has the same potential to be successful.
All right, so moving on. Support and advocate for the incorporation of high-performance building efficiency systems into the Uniform Building Code.
Good luck.
Josh, on that one, we need to cross off uniform.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to replace it with Michigan, and then we can leave building there, but we also need to add residential and energy codes. All three of them work together.
Yeah.
And the barrier,
Yeah.
frankly, is energy code. The others are kind of paralleling, but there's advocacy going on this one already from a lot of fronts to move our energy code out of prehistoric times to the next
Yeah.
level. So-
Yeah, here.
You know, another exercise that might be worthwhile is going through these and thinking about what kind of recommendations, to our earlier conversation, we could give to city council as to how best to pursue some of these things. So if we know certain avenues that could overcome some of these things.
Well, certainly, on this one, I don't, I don't know if we found out yet what the lobbying group we pay for, what they actually do, but short of getting the lobbying reports, but perhaps asking them to work on this specific thing.
Well, that's the function of the policy commission, I guess we're calling it, or committee on city council is they are directing our lobbyists as to what is important to us, and they report back to them. And it really depends on the opportunities in Lansing. You know, if we saw some legislation moving on the alternative energy taxation, and they were active on that. We just have the wrong legislature.
Straight about that.
But it's not that they're not working on our behalf, it's that, you know, they're yelling into a deep well. And
Yes.
We're changing it slowly.
I would suggest that this election cycle has made some positive changes in
Indeed.
this fashion, that our new governor may in fact be more impressed with this subject than our previous one.
Well, and sometimes there is something to be said for term limits. Some of the people are leaving. Not that I'm an advocate for that.
And then this last one here, advocate for a carbon fee and dividend plan consistent with resolution R17-314 Appendix B. So that's again about the carbon fee and dividend plan. The other kind of sector that I identified that we might want to add to this list are EV related, especially since we do have an EV ordinance.
Yes.
Yep.
So in what fashion do you want to address that issue?
So I think there's currently a lot happening on the state level. There's a Volkswagen settlement that's going through right now, trying to find out how that's going to be spent at the state level. That's one way that we can get involved. So I think at the legislative, in general, legislative level, making sure that we have a finger on the pulse and that we're making recommendations is best to kind of promote EVs. That's language that we could craft now, or I could put something together and share it with you guys to edit either way. I don't mind. For expediency's sake, I could.
Another potential topic, and I'm not frankly qualified to talk about it, but your boss would be, and that is there anything that should be done from a climate adaptation perspective?
Yeah.
I think Missy's got a lot of experience in that area. This is all sort of mitigation sort of focus.
Right.
But I think from the adaptation side, there may be legislation or things that we should be pushing at the state level. And I think Missy would be able to craft a statement, or Dr. Stoltz would be able to craft a statement to that effect and include that on the list. So maybe you could have her do that.
So there's an environmental commission portion as well. And I think some of the things, she had made some recommendations as well.
Oh, at the bottom there, okay.
Yeah, to the environmental
Okay,
commission.
sorry, yep.
But if we can think of anything that's more kind of energy related that we would be dealing on a daily basis. You know, I kind of went through and thought about our subcommittees, and it kind of covers, I think, what we have now outside of the EV component, but. Okay, well, if you guys can think of anything else, email me and I'll add it onto the list.
So one of the problems that we have at council often is that when we're looking at new development in town, we can't push them to, you know, incorporate energy efficiency or green roofs or variety of those things unless they're in certain very narrow zoning districts. And certainly to the extent that, I think this comes up in your first one, but we really want the building codes to really recognize that some communities want to be more adventuresome. You know, we really want to push on these issues. And we're in a boom cycle right now, building-wise, and we can't require 6-inch studs in new houses. We can't require more insulation than, you know, the state code does. We can't encourage solar or anything else in a house, and certainly to the extent that we can get the legislature in Lansing to give us more discretion, that would be friendly.
What's
Yep.
happened in other states, I was involved in Massachusetts where they passed this, the ability for a community to enforce stronger rules. So, it exists in other places.
Chuck, you need to get closer to the microphone.
Sorry, Massachusetts is one. There's several states that have pushed this to the local jurisdictions, so.
Well, didn't Ann Arbor also provide some incentive to builders that they could do higher floors on buildings if they met certain energy standards? I know it wasn't as successful, but there was, I mean, we have some freedom to do things, don't we?
In certain zoning districts, so like the downtown area is either D1 or D2, and there are limits on height, and if you want to exceed that, you have to provide some public benefit like affordable housing or energy efficiency or something like that. And they've almost always chosen something other than energy efficiency.
Right.
But that's something that we're quite likely to revisit this year, because at one point in time, just including any kind of residential space in your downtown development got you a greater height. Didn't even have to be affordable housing. And so we're trying to narrow the benefits that they can. Another zoning district where we get to exercise some discretion is with the planned unit developments, or PUDs.
Right.
And they have to provide us public benefits, and affordability is one of those. And so is energy efficiency. And so we can push harder on those if we use those zoning districts more effectively than we have. So for instance, the lower town development, where the Kroger's used to be at the base of Broadway Hill, we released them from that zoning district and gave them a very permissive zoning of C1AR. And so they don't have to provide us anything. We have to be less permissive in our exercise of rezoning and more demanding in our desire for public benefits like energy efficiency.
So towards that end, is there anything that the Energy Commission could do that would make it easier for you to be stronger on those issues? Towards that end, is there anything that the Energy Commission can do that make it easier for you to strengthen your hand so you could do those kinds of things going forward? I mean, us saying we think this is a good idea, you should do more of it, or what can we do? Because you obviously already know that.
So, yeah, so let me ponder that, and I'll come back with an ask if I can think of an ask.
It's a good idea, good exchange.
If you want to do something to help us at council, you can recognize that one of the easiest things we can do to address climate change is to plant trees. And we are reckless with our current trees. And one of the things that we are doing to address our tree population is our deer call, which is wildly controversial. And if we were to express the opinion that this is a good outlet, you know, by reducing deer overgrazing, we're encouraging reforestation in our natural areas. It's not a popular idea. You may turn the public against you, but it's one of the easiest things that we can do, is just to not have deer eat all the oak seedlings, you know, and it has a real and measurable impact over time. So,
Josh, would you take a cut at writing such a resolution for us to consider at our December meeting towards that effect?
Well, December is a work session.
I know, so we could, or maybe we could.
But besides that, I think our purview is more energy focused, even though I don't know if that's something that maybe the Environmental Commission.
I wrote it down.
For them.
That-
Okay.
Because the Environmental Commission does have, you're right, it's exactly in that wheelhouse. And one of the sustainability dashboard metrics is the tree canopy, as Josh knows. And so I think that doesn't mean that we couldn't have that resolution also endorsed by Energy Commission, but it probably starts best in Environmental Commission, and I made a note. Yep.
Okay. So with that being said, okay, so I'll go ahead and craft the EV-related one. We'll go ahead and I'll pass that around.
Great.
Finalize a list. So as
Committee
far
updates.
yeah, I just realized that what we printed probably went back to the template because it's an old one. So I'm just going to go ahead and read off the committees that we have, and we can go ahead and do updates one by one. So 100% clean and municipal operations. We met we discussed Honeywell's proposition. We've decided to move beyond Honeywell, and our next meeting will be talking about next steps. We did have a little bit of a conversation as far as what next steps would be, but I think that'll really be the focus of our next meeting. In general, I've created templates for all of these meetings. I put them up on Legistar. There's also reading material on those templates. So if people want to join, you can go ahead and actually read it, just download it. There are links that are right into the agenda, that they're basically built into the agenda. You could take a reading and join us. The next one is Dark Skies Ordinance. John, did you want to do a bit of an
Yeah,
update?
very briefly, we haven't met, I don't think, since the last committee meeting, but we meet next week. We have a draft ordinance that's been, it's sort of like a straw man, I guess you'd say. Everybody is in the process of putting comments into a Google Docs framework, and we're going to meet and review all those comments and then hopefully come up with the next iteration. Our target date for having essentially a semi-final draft that we could then show to the Energy Commission as well as the Planning Commission, I believe, is in the beginning of February. So we still have a chance for an iteration or two between this meeting next week and then when we would then present a final draft. But we're making good progress.
So I have a question. And I know that you've told me this before, so I apologize. But have we included the city attorney's office in the drafting of this?
Yeah, so
Okay.
one of the steps in the timeline that we have is going to not only the city attorney, but with the Planning Commission and others, we identified all the key stakeholder groups and are also going to meet with those stakeholder groups as well. So, yep. And we also, fortunately, the Planning Commission at the same time was looking at a sign ordinance, and we looked at that sign ordinance because there's a lot of signs that are lit, and so we provided input in that. That'll be separate. That'll be a part of the sign ordinance, but we were able to address the lighting aspects of that at the same time.
Great. All right, next we have time of marketing ordinance, and I can also lump in a little bit of the EV ready ordinance as well. So for both of our our ordinance subcommittees, we went ahead and took a look at a timeline. So with John's help, we took a look at what Dark Skies was doing. I've begun to basically put a timeline together for each of those committees for our next meeting. We also identified some of the stakeholders that we want to bring to the table in the process. I shared with everyone some kind of overview material, so that way we can all look at the same stuff and be on the same page. So both of those, again, will be meeting this month, and we'll be looking at some of those, the timeline, stakeholders, things of that nature.
Josh, before you go on to the next one, I think
Yes.
for clarity's sake, for not so much necessarily this committee, because we keep on talking about it, but for residents,
Sure.
why don't we rename the Dark Skies ordinance? It's really going to be a lighting ordinance.
Sure.
And I think that is more meaningful to anybody looking from the outside in or listening on TV
That's
or
great,
whatever,
yeah.
or looking at minutes or agendas.
And maybe for time of marketing, we could do something along the lines of energy audit disclosure, so that way it's a bit more, or, yeah, that works, okay.
At time of market, maybe, if you want to be really, really clear.
At time of market, okay. Market. I think the EV readiness kind of makes sense. Okay, solar access. Chuck, did you have an update?
So a little humor to add to the commission, sometimes we need this. So my son happens to live in this little town in Colorado that thinks it's more advanced than we are, called Boulder. So I reached out to him a little bit to find out, I just helped him build a new house. And new houses in Boulder, there's a pretty strong solar access easement ordinance requirement there. And actually, it's batted about as being the revolution of solar access easements. So I've adopted the Boulder concept a little bit, and I've actually written something. So this one-man ordinance activity has moved to the next step. I need to piggyback on some of the other ordinance work that's going on to get the stakeholders, Planning Commission, and Director of Planning involved in the city. But I think we're at a state where before I do that, I want to make sure this body is comfortable with what we're proposing. There are already, too much going on in the city that needs to have this move forward, because I have at least one solar system. Wayne, you may have others that are now shaded because we allowed construction to go beyond where it should have. So I'll bring that to the body, and I think we have a work session next time. We'll have that for the body next.
It's a tricky one.
It is tricky.
And it's trickier here than it is in Boulder, because Boulder has a height limitation because
They
they
do.
want you to be able to see the mountains.
That is correct.
And so they're limited to, I think, 6 stories.
Maybe
And,
somewhere in there.
You know, it's something like that, so.
Interestingly, Boulder, because of settlements with the utility in Colorado, give the solar panels to the residents. So my son has a free array on his house. He didn't have to pay a cent for the array.
Really?
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
So isn't that wonderful?
Sure.
So I wonder if we could pass something in our ordinance. Any new residents in Ann Arbor gets free solar panels.
We just have to sue the utility.
But we'll tax them though afterwards, right?
Thanks. I'll keep it moving.
Yeah, great, thank you for working on that.
Okay, outreach to schools. Carlene is not here. I do have a little bit of an update. I reached out to Jason Bing about power purchase agreements. We're looking at National Housing Trust as well as Michigan Saves as a possible PPA, power purchase agreement model. And we are interested to see if the schools were looking into it. Thankfully, they are. So those conversations will be ongoing.
U of M is also working on a PPA with DTE. Are you in touch at all with the Office of Campus Sustainability, or I don't know?
Yeah, is this is the wind?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we know
Okay.
about it, yeah.
Okay, good. I thought so.
Yeah, that's something that. Okay, community outreach. There wasn't much on this front. I do know that there's an idea kind of put forth as far as getting out into the community and having some conversations. I don't know where things lie with that. Mark, would you know, or Wayne?
The listening tour?
The listening tour, as it were, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's a discussion about that. Dr. Stelz is looking at the information that was collected from various people on inputs, and I'm meeting with her in December.
Okay.
Great. It's a great idea to get input from the community and to get out there and find out what they're interested in, and maybe help them understand what some of our issues are at the same time.
I can tell you what they're saying. They're mad at us for taxing their solar installations.
Yeah? Well, hopefully that will change this
With-
month.
With those new bills, yeah.
They're reportedly going to be acted on.
All right, John, report from the Environmental Commission?
So you guys had the joint meeting, everybody knows about that, and since then, the main focus has been still on solid waste, and maybe just to elaborate on that a little bit, we're in the process, the city is, with heavy involvement from Environmental Commission in the Solid Waste Resource Management Plan update, together with the city's consultants, Aptum, and tomorrow afternoon will be the first meeting with the so-called advisory group, which includes people that are sort of experts in the field, as well as key stakeholder groups, downtown businesses, residents that are involved. And I'll be attending that as a substitute for Allison Skinner. But that process is a multi-step process that goes through July. So there's still many steps beyond that. But that's been basically the focus of the Environmental Commission, in addition to the other topic that I mentioned earlier was the future meetings and what we're going to be handling in those meetings. So that's main thing for, I think, your interest.
All right, great.
Great, thank you.
That does it for the subcommittees.
Okay. We still have some public out there. Would anybody like to say anything about energy? 3 minutes. Come on up. State your name and let's hear it.
Hi there, Jenny Zucker, Ann Arbor resident. So I know the council's talked talking about, or looking for specific projects that they can kind of latch onto. I just quickly Googled to find the most recent info about the Viridian at County Farms, which is from MLive in September 24th of 2018. So it seems like it's getting quite close. I know it's the county's land, but it's inside the city, so it seems like it should be a really good opportunity for the Energy Commission, the Environmental Commission, the whole city to really make sure we're partnering with this whole project. Maybe we can offer input on lighting or EV readiness or whatever, and I'm sure even if they've thought of everything already, that we could learn a lot from it, and hopefully that'll go towards some future projects. But it seems like it would be a shame if the whole thing got done and we couldn't say, we as a city, we're partnering strongly with this thing. That's going to be a major showcase for clean energy in the future. And it did say, let's see, what does it say here? They should have given their final vote on October 3rd for the purchase, and that the next steps continue advocacy through the city's approval process. So it sounds like it's maybe in the city's court right now, and hopefully we as a Energy Commission and then the rest of the commissions and the council and everything can, maybe that's a project we could jump on board with and partner with. So
I can give you some information. I met with numerous times with Matt Brokoff about this project, and kind of he couldn't really move until it got through the county. One of the things we've discussed is getting that area designated as a solar microgrid, and so carving it out as a microgrid that requires DTE's participation. We've had some preliminary meetings with DTE on this subject, and the ball is kind of in Matt's court right now, just to decide whether or not, there's various ways to pursue that, but I mean, one way is having, there's nothing that precludes every individual home in that area from putting solar on their house and doing a net meter with the utilities, assuming they don't outlaw that by the time this gets done. But doing it as a solar microgrid adds a lot of benefits to the community as a whole, and it provides the city with some emergency response benefits and some other things. So we won't get a solar microgrid unless the city is actively engaged with DTE, and Matt knows that, and preliminary discussions have happened. We've offered to have him come to the Energy Commission and request our endorsement of the solar microgrid idea, and we're waiting for him.
okay.
So, for example, a resolution, we shouldn't initiate until we get a signal from Matt?
Until we get some, I've given Matt a draft resolution several months ago, and we're literally waiting. I sent him an email here when the county did the thing and said, when do you want us to do this now? And he said, I'll get back with you. So we're waiting, but I think I agree with you. It would be an outstanding project, and it as a solar microgrid, it would really be a good project. And Chuck knows a lot about solar microgrid, and they're actually, consumers is testing solar microgrid battery hybrids, which would be ideal for this as well. I'm trying to encourage consumers to buy DTE and make this easier, but in the short run, we'll probably have to deal with DTE on this. So. Chuck, you want anything?
I'm going to suggest that the planning process is going to be less of an obstacle than the microgrid process. But when it enters the planning process, there are opportunities for a public hearing at the Planning Commission. And so if you or anybody in the community has ideas as to what they'd like to see be part of that community, I think that's a good idea. They've got exciting ideas, but nobody can think of everything. They would certainly entertain those, but there's plenty of public opportunity to discuss this before it gets to City Council. So,
I don't know if there's any way we can have, the Energy Commission can have some kind of formal partnership with.
Matt's it's in his court. He's got to come forward to us.
Matt has met with me too on several occasions, so I think he knows where to come to.
Right. We've been very open and invited him to engage with us.
Matt Smith with everybody.
Great.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any other input from?
Jack, could you mentioned the other day we were there about the city water department is putting in filters for PFAS. Can you say anything more about that?
We're spending a lot of money on the best technology that we have available, which is some kind of activated charcoal filters. It's proven to be somewhat effective. You know, you don't get to zero. You just don't. I mean, one of the reasons why PFAS is just an emerging issue is because over the last 10 years, they've just been developing the technology to measure down to parts per billion. And PFAS is dangerous at parts per billion, whereas like dioxin is parts per million. And so when you're down at parts per billion, if you can cut it from 37 down to 10 or something like that, that's a dramatic decrease. But you know, I think it's pretty hard to get below that. You know.
When will that be activated?
We've authorized the expenditure to install the filtering.
Okay. So by spring?
I'm sorry.
Maybe we should be working on facilitating individual households to use rainwater catchment systems.
You know, somebody
Like-
actually
like
proposed.
Matt has on his house, right?
Proposed to me that we should be encouraging the collection of water to use for, you know, gardens, parks, trees. Enough water runs off from your yard to take care of a considerable portion of the greenery around you that you want.
Rain barrels.
Yeah.
Which Matt has done with his home, his personal home. I don't know if everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
So, it's,
everything except for potable water, he's using brown or green rainwater.
But certainly, from an environmental standpoint, and this is not energy related, just our fundamental infrastructure is so important to our role as environmentalists, you know, because just periodically you'll read in MLive about us dumping 100,000 gallons of raw sewage into the river, which is not a good thing. You'll read about PFAS foam in the river that you shouldn't touch or eat. I hope that you don't have to be told that, but you know, the dioxin is headed towards the river, and it's just a matter of whether it hits the river far enough north to taint our water supply. So again and again, our infrastructure issues are really environmental issues. And so when I talk about the competing interests in our city budget, when we're, you know, deciding how to spend that $108 million, these are, you know, some of the more pressing issues that we have, you know, tens of millions of dollars worth of needs.
So since you're talking about water, I'll pass something on. Maybe we can get an answer at some point, because I gave it to Matt a while back and never got any answer back from the water department. There was a study that came out.
To Matt Nod.
Yes.
Okay.
About a year ago now, where they looked at 40 or 50 cities worldwide, their water supply, and they tested for microplastics, and they discovered that most of them had some in it. And so I asked the question, do we have that in our water system in Ann Arbor? And I never got an answer.
So I think the important question is, do we test for that in Ann Arbor? You know, right now we're dealing with microbiological issues, and you know, there's lots of stuff in the water from decades and centuries of irresponsibility. You know,
The microplastic ones is an interesting one, because we use so much plastics, and we let so much of it go out into the environment, and then they added microplastics to facial creams and everything, and you know, it's just everywhere, and it's coming off of our synthetic clothes and everything else, and yet they don't know what the safe levels of ingestion are. You know, you eat fish and you eat that, because it's definitely in fish.
send me an email to remind me to ask whether we
Okay.
test for that.
I will.
Because I'm going from this meeting to another meeting, and I'll forget before I get home.
Okay.
All right,
I will do that.
I appreciate that.
And
But that's,
Also microplastics, the other problem is carryover drugs. If you think microplastics
Yeah.
are a problem. And some of these things hydrolyze, some of them just go away because they react with other things in the
Yeah.
water. Some of the carryover drugs are not. And so
Yeah.
there's some elements of that we have to worry
Yeah.
about. So to Jack's point, there's more than what you think in the water.
Yeah, there's a lot.
oh, yeah.
You know, lots of pharmaceuticals, you know.
Okay,
That's why I drink beer rather than water.
there you go. Answer to all our
As if there's
problems.
no water in the beer.
Okay,
So I get something good out of it.
Okay.
after a slight digression here, items for the next agenda. It's a working session. So I don't know whether anyone has anything that we'd like to work on?
Well, my resolution.
So I have an ongoing conversation about commission and staff and city council and how best we could have that relationship. I also have an update on energy fund. So
That would be, yes.
yeah, so I have met with Dave Conkle, and we're thinking about how best to kind of reboot the energy fund. And then finally, Mark, for January's meeting, we have your resolution.
So, I can bring forward at least a report on the listening tour stuff, because I'll have a chance to talk to Missy
Great.
about that, and
That's great.
so I can report on that.
Okay.
So I have a quick question. At the last council meeting, we passed bylaws for a commission that's yet to be formed. And I'm wondering, what's the status of our bylaws? Did we pass those?
They got tabled when there was a move afoot to combine us with the Environmental Commission, which now seems to be dead, so it is something.
Yeah,
that
so we
will
should
have
bring
to
that forward
Yeah,
in the
that's
near
great.
future.
Yes, good point.
What's that on? The
Yeah.
commission, what's that on?
Police Oversight Commission.
Oh, fun.
That's
I
how
think
spent
that's
my
enough for
summer.
now. If people come up with other
I-
things.
Two
before-
two other possibilities, and the rest of the commissioners should weigh in on when's appropriate. A Solar Faithful update, I think would be interesting. And then potentially, especially in light of what Dave talked about, because I know Chart House was also a possibility, and what's the carryover from that to the city or Ann Arbor Public Schools,
Schools,
et cetera. Eventually, that sort of carries over into community solar kinds of things, but right now, we don't have, I haven't had a subcommittee meeting on that because there's really nothing to do, especially also with the Freedom Package going through the House and waiting on Solar Faithful. So an update at some point, Josh, you can maybe tell us when. I mean, it could be December, it could be in January or past then. And the other one is something that I would present. We had a contingent from our sister city, Tübingen, that was here. We hosted a couple, my wife and I did, and attended several events, and one of them was an event with Mayor Taylor and council members from both Tübingen and Ann Arbor talking about three sort of common issues between the cities, and one was energy and climate action. And there was a presentation that was given by a Tübingen, a member of their city council, and I have a copy of that I had him leave with me, and I could go over that briefly. I'm not going to be able to get into real detail, but it'd be interesting for us to see what they're tracking, what metrics they're using, some of the strategies that they've employed, some of which are no to low cost kinds of things, some of which actually tie in with what Dave's doing about job programs. So I could present that at whatever meeting is appropriate.
What country is the city in?
Tübingen, Germany.
Germany.
Yep. It's a university town like Ann Arbor, about the same size, in one of our sister cities.
Right, that'd be wonderful.
I know Shoshana Lensky also sent a few recommendations as far as topics for the
Yes.
next. That's something that I'll be working with her to see when best timing would be for
Okay, great,
you. of
wonderful.
that. So-
Well, if there's nothing else, we'll call this meeting adjourned at 8:10.
Yes?
I'm, for my project, I'm working about kind of how sometimes companies or environmental regulations hurt underprivileged people in terms of like income. So is there any like incentives short term for people looking for like solar panels and other environmental friendly stuff?
Are there incentives for
Yeah, that's-
solar and something?
Yeah, but like short term, because a lot of the things we're talking about is.
There's a 30% federal tax credit.
But that's for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think equity, our office has really been taking an equity lens in the things we've been doing. One of the things that I know we've been looking at as far as rental housing and energy efficiency audits, one of the problems that we often find is when we require energy efficiency upgrades to be done in rental units, it can disproportionately affect those that have the most burden. So that's something that I know we've been working with Boulder and others to try to see if there are market forces that we can use to help on that front. The other side, affordable housing. So everything we've been doing, I recently completed a net zero analysis of some affordable housing, where the idea would be, energy costs are usually a large burden for those that obviously are hard pressed economically. And so we've been finding ways to possibly bring down their energy burden through energy efficiency upgrades. A lot of energy efficiency upgrades, specifically things like LED lights, can bring down the cost of electrical use, and the upfront costs can be much less than, for example, major upgrades. On top of that, we're also helping or I guess proposing to help subsidize some of those energy efficiency upgrades as well as renewables. So I think those are a few things we're looking at.
Maybe you could exchange contact
Yeah,
information.
we'll continue to, yeah.
And I don't know if you
That's the best way
picked
to-
up earlier, one of the things that Councilman Eaton mentioned earlier is that there is a resolution in front of council to provide funding. And as he mentioned, a major portion of that is for $200,000 that would essentially make affordable housing units that are on Broadway net zero.
Right.
And so the idea is that both energy efficiency as well as solar measures would be taken so that people that are living in those would essentially not have utility costs anymore, other than water and gas from the electrical side would be net. The gas side is not being addressed in the net zero, right?
So
Only electricity?
So my recommendations were to turn all the natural gas appliances to electric.
To electric,
Yeah,
okay.
where
Okay,
possible.
so it would be truly net zero,
Yes,
other than,
that would
yeah,
be the
than,
idea.
than the water.
And then more generally, our housing director is looking at our affordable housing units as we retrofit them to be more durable and more energy efficient. So not necessarily net zero, but just changing out the appliances so that they don't consume as much electricity,
Yeah.
or just adequately insulating a housing unit saves on heating and cooling costs. So we're trying to address people of modest incomes at one of those levels that pounds them harder than the rest of us. You know, I mean, air conditioning isn't a luxury to me, but, heating and cooling costs are a major expense for someone who's on a limited income. And so just making our housing units for subsidized housing more affordable in all respects.
Have you any contact with Habitat for Humanity? So, obviously they're serve low-income people, and you should talk to them. They have, all of their homes are built energy, or their retrofits as well, are Energy Star related, which is a threshold from the Department of Energy. And they also provide incentive programs for things like replacing old refrigerators and things like that. That's sort of linked in with DTE. But you should contact, there's Habitat of Humanity of Washtenaw County, and you should contact them. Some of the things that they do might be of interest for your report.
And the county also has a program that's very similar.
Yeah, that's true.
somewhat
That's a good point.
overlapping. I think the power hour that we did at
Yes.
the library is
Oh, yeah.
available on the web, and you can look at it, where we had somebody from DTE and somebody from the county and somebody from Habitat, all talking about different things that were assistance programs for energy
Yeah,
efficiency.
that was recorded just like this meeting, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You should be able to access it, I think, maybe through the city or the district library.
Yeah, and I'll give you my contact information. We can talk more. We'll go into it, yeah.
It's hard to find on the library's website, but it is there.
But I want to applaud your attention to that issue, because certainly energy and environmental issues harm minorities and people of low income more than the rest of us. It's true. They're living through it in ways that we don't.
All the power plants are in their neighborhoods and everything else, too, yeah.
Well, there's Flint,
Right.
too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, with that, we're adjourned.